My name is Ceren, as Alice mentioned. I am an email marketing specialist and I've been in the sector 8.5 years now. And I am currently working with Bloomberg for the past 2.5 years. Today, I'll be speaking to you about what email deliverability is and what we need to think about if we want to increase our deliverability. So first of all, let's have a look at what email deliverability is. So as senders, when we deploy an email to our recipient's email address, first of all, it's the server that receives this email. And depending on the settings they have on their end, if the server decides to accept the email, it will decide whether the email should be placed into the inbox or promotions folder or into the junk folder. When it comes to email deliverability, our aim is to increase the chances of the email being placed into the inbox or promotions folder and decrease the chances of it being placed into the junk folder. Some people call it spam folder, some people call it junk folder. I will just use both as we go through the slides. So when it comes to email deliverability, why is it so important for us is basically as senders, we all have different reasons as to why we're sending out our emails. So one reason could be that promoting a new product. It could be promoting a new service, building brand loyalty. It could be just passing on a specific information to your recipients. We all have different reasons. And if our email deliverability is very low, it's likely that the email is going to land into junk folder. And in some cases, the email might not even reach their mailbox. So that means that, we're not really reaching the full potential of our recipients, and we're not, really reaching our goal as well. So high email deliverability will maximize the reach of our marketing campaigns for us. This leads me on to my second point, which will be increased levels of engagement. Again, if the email is landing into the junk folder or if it's not even reaching them at all, you're more likely to see lower levels of engagement. And also, personally, if an email lands into my junk folder, I don't tend to open it or click on any of the links if I'm 100% sure of who's sending it, if I trust that, sending address. But except that, I don't really interact with it. So again, that's going to be lower levels of engagement for the person who's sending it. The next point will be building a good brand reputation. So what happens is, if you have high email deliverability, we're kind of building trust between ISPs, email clients, and ourselves as a sender. So this kind of means to ISPs and email clients like Outlook and Gmail is that we are sending legitimate emails to these people. So it's in return, it's less likely that they're going to see our email as spam, and we're less likely to end up in blacklists as well, which I will talk about a little bit later on. So with email deliverability, I will be looking at domain authentication records, sender reputation, and email content today. There are a few other things that we can consider, but these are the main topics that I'll be covering today for you. So domain authentication records, this is the first thing we'll be looking at. When we send an email out, we're using an email address to send this email. And each email address will contain a domain. So here is an example from Netflix. This is from an email that I received into my personal inbox. This is the domain they're using and the email address they're using. So if we look at the email address, it's info@members.netflix.com, and the section after the @ is their sending domain. So they're using this domain. And when it comes to the domain authentication records, these are like digital signatures that gets assigned to that specific domain. It's basically used to verify that the email is coming from a legitimate sender, so it's not spam. The records include DKIM, SPF, and DMARC records. DKIM basically validates the domain identity. SPF, it just tells the email clients that the email is coming from a domain authorized to be used by the sender or the admin. And DMARC is basically letting the receiver know that this email is protected with DKIM and SPF. And if that's not the case, it informs the server what to do. In some cases, it could be like reject the email, quarantine the email, or just do nothing, you know. Domain authentication records used to be a best practice that was recommended within email marketing until this beginning of this year, where Google and Yahoo introduced sender requirements, and this was one of their requirements. And they said, from now on, beginning of the year, in order for us to reach us, the senders should have DKIM and SPF, at least at minimum, applied to their domain. So this is now something we need to do, and I will just briefly touch on the requirements they introduced later on in my slides. So this is the domain authentication records, and the next thing is the sender reputation. Sender reputation is like a credit score. So if you go to a bank and apply for a loan, they check your credit score and kind of base their decision on that. This is very similar. So this is like a credit score called the sender score that's applied to the IP address that belongs to the sending domain. So basically the score is between 0 to 100. Something 90 to 100 is an excellent score. But if you ever find yourself as a sender, dropping below 80, it might be good to check certain things on your end, because that can indicate there is a problem going on. And if that happens consistently for a very long time, it will eventually affect the email deliverability. So some factors contributing to sender reputation. The first one is data health. I mean, it's very, very important to keep your data opted in, and also new data as well. So what happens is, if you have data that is not opted in and it's also old data, for example, you had this email address on your database for a very long time, like a few years, it's very likely that you're going to be seeing increased rates of bounces, unsubscribes, complaints, and spam traps. I'll talk about what these are a little bit. So bounces are delivery failures. There is soft and a hard bounce. Soft bounce is a temporary delivery failure. For example, if someone is on a holiday, their mailbox is full, then that's going to result into a soft bounce. Hard bounce is a permanent delivery failure. If someone left the company, their email address is no longer in use, that's going to result into a hard bounce. Complaints is basically a recipient receiving your email and marking it as junk, or moving it into the junk folder or spam folder. Then we have the spam traps. So spam traps are basically very old email addresses that's no longer in use by the person who initially opened the email. And it's an email address that's converted by ISPs and spam houses to basically identify who is sending to old data. And then if they notice certain senders, hitting the spam traps quite often, then, you can, it's going to affect the email deliverability. You might end up in a block list on their end and stuff like that. So it is very, very important to keep the data healthy and up to date. This is going to improve the email engagement, and it's going to improve the sender reputation. And in return, it's basically overall going to improve your email deliverability. Then we have the blacklists. With the blacklist, so when the email reaches the recipient server, the server will check the email, sorry, the domain and the IP address against a collection of blacklists. And if they find that your IP or domain exists in one of those, then they might decide to reject the email or put it into the spam folder. With some of the blacklists, you are required to get in touch with them to request delisting. And with some of them, you just need to hold your sends for 48 hours, and then your domain or IP address will get delisted. But if, in those cases, if you're getting blacklisted again and again, then eventually they might request you to provide proof of opt-in, which is why this is like another point why it's important to have opted-in data and, have that proof. So sender reputation, and then next up will be the email content. When it comes to the email content, so lately there is a lot of emphasis that's put on, the domain, the IP address, making sure everything is aligned and, set up correctly when it comes to those two things. And, the authentication records and everything are working fine. But one other factor which I believe is still important is the email content, which contributes to email deliverability. Few things over here that I do want to point out. One of them is frequent use of spammy words. So things like free, 100% free, giveaway, call now, increase sales, things like this. If you're using them again and again within your emails, especially when that is combined with my second point, which is very large font sizes, just to get more attention, usually people increase the font size a lot and stuff. These two things combined together is going to make your email look very, very spammy. So I do think, just kind of be wary of these and stay away from using these a little bit too much. And then we have the text color being the same or very similar to the background color. I've seen this with some of my previous clients, and I think this makes it look like you're trying to hide something within the email, and then some email filters don't like this, and they think this is a spam email, and they're likely to put the email into junk folder. So also one thing to consider as well. Then we have the text to image ratio. There's a lot of debate around this, but what I usually recommend is to 60 to 40 ratio, 60 being the text, 40 being the images. So what we don't want is you having so many images within your email, or so much text you don't have any images within the email. We just want a good balance so that the email is not going to look spammy to the email filters, and increase the chances of going into the inbox folder. So when it comes to the email content, these are like some of the things I would recommend you to just think about and have a look at before sending out your emails or creating your templates as well. So those were the three things that contribute towards higher email deliverability. Now, looking at the Google and Yahoo changes they introduced. So when they actually initially started talking about this, it was a lot of email marketers were panicking, and it was like, oh my God, what's happening? What do we need to do and stuff? But what Google and Yahoo is doing, especially Google, they are kind of rolling this out very slowly. So it's not like an overnight change, which has been good for us. And four things I do want to cover with these changes. It's basically one of them is authentication requirements. So these are the authentication records I talked about earlier. So now for all senders, they want SPF and DKIM to be added to the sending domain. For bulk senders, that's sending over 5,000 messages a day to Gmail. Gmail also requests, and I think Yahoo requests this as well, to add the DMARC record onto the domain as well. So all three of them should be applied. Next is the encryption requirement. So this started in December last year, whereas the other requirements are being, the authentication requirements started January this year. With the encryption one, they basically added the TLS requirement, which basically means all emails must use a TLS connection to encrypt the email when the email is being transmitted from you and to the recipient. This is not necessarily something you need to action. If you're using an ESP, they need to apply these changes on their end because this is like a technical change that needs to be done in the back end. It's very likely that majority of the ESPs are using this, but if you're not sure, you can double check the email headers if you know how to dig into that. Alternatively, you can just get in touch with the support team within your ESP, and then they can confirm if this has been added or not. Next will be the spam complaint rate threshold. So Gmail wants to see spam complaint rates less than 0.1%. So these are the recipients marking your email as junk or moving it into the junk folder. This is another reason why it's important to have a healthy database and send to those people who are actually interested in your content. They said that if it reaches 0.3, then the senders could be facing inboxing issues, meaning that there could be problems going into the inbox. So this is also one thing to keep in mind. Next up is the easy unsubscribe option. So in our emails, usually at the very bottom, we tend to have the unsubscribe link, and then recipients click on that and then they can unsubscribe. There is also one-click unsubscribe, which became a requirement now. So basically, this is an unsubscribe link that gets added at the within the headers of the email. And you can see this when you're on Gmail and stuff at the very top as a recipient. So if you look at the screenshot over here, I put it in a yellow box. So that's the one-click unsubscribe link that Gmail and Yahoo is now requesting. The aim of this is to make it easier for the recipients to unsubscribe, and Google and Yahoo will be looking to see if this has been honored. So, if someone unsubscribes through here and you're still sending to them, there is a problem. You might get deliverability problems. So I think this also applies to the bulk senders as well. And also, you don't necessarily need to take any action on your end. This is something the ESP needs to implement on the back end. But you can, again, double check with them if this has been implemented. But I did start seeing this, not just with Google and Yahoo. This is now being supported via Hotmail as well. So I did started seeing that option on Outlook and Hotmail too. So these are the things that Google and Yahoo, introduced, and they're slowly rolling out. And with these, we started also seeing new bounces, new bounce back messages, and we're just kind of identifying those as well. And next, I will talk about, monitoring your email deliverability. So, all this information, what are we going to do with it? First of all, I would say when it comes to email deliverability, check your open and click rates. If you're seeing a really big drop in these, then, it might be worth looking at your data. It might be, worth looking at your emails to see what's really happening. Track and review your bounces. So with the ESPs, they tend to give back bounce back data. And within that, you should be able to see bounce back messages. So why did this person bounce? Is it an invalid email address? Is it because their mailbox is full? What's the reason behind these bounce rates? If you're seeing very high bounce rates, if you're seeing very high complaints rates, then, again, that you could be facing some email deliverability issues later on. So it's good to try to reduce the bounces and the complaint rates, and of course the spam traps as well. Use of Postmaster tool. So Google has a really good Postmaster tool. I think Yahoo does as well, but Yahoo is kind of in the beta stages. So I would go with Google first of all. It's very easy to set this up. The two screenshots you can see, so one of them right top, that's from Google Masters, Postmasters. They created like this type of dashboard, which kind of easily tells you if, if you're kind of meeting their requirements, basically, if you're compliant with them, compliant with their requirements they introduce. So this is like a very good way of seeing it very easily, kind of thing. And the bottom left, that's a screenshot from the spam that they're showing. So it's like a graph, and then it shows the reported spam. So this kind of gives you a good indication when it comes to, trying to see this complaint rates for Gmail. So I would recommend to get on board with the Postmaster tools. You can monitor your sender reputation as well. So when it comes to monitoring the sender reputation, as far as I understand, each ISP does have slightly different sender scores, but the senderscore.org is the one that I tend to use quite often. This is a free tool. You just need to register with it, and then you can check your IP address over there. I tend to look at this quite often and monitor our sender score. If I see a very sudden drop in there, then I tend to go back to the emails that we deployed within the last few days, like last 3 days, and then see what's happening, see where I'm receiving too many bounces and stuff. And then that kind of gives me a good indicator of what went wrong. And then I tend to fix that just to make sure that we don't have this same problem again in the future. And which is going to basically stop you from or decrease the chances of you having email deliverability problems or bigger problems in the future. So that's one good tool to use. Also, you can monitor blacklists as well, just to see if you're on, if your IP address or domain is on any of the blacklists. I tend to have a look at this now and then. So one tool I use, there are a variety of tools, by the way, for both of the options. But for the blacklists, I tend to use MX Toolbox, and you can just easily check it over there. Again, this is a free tool as well. So this is kind of, I think, everything I have to cover on my end. Thank you all so much for your time.